Cageside with Sean Morgan.
And welcome back, fresh off the heels of UFC 294 from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. I know that question, right? Could be the desert, but I know the answer to that. Islam Makhachev, he's very good. Khamzat Chimaev, he is very good. Nut shots hurt a lot and can have lasting damages. And a little confused why there's no DQ when you get intentionally kneed in the head. We'll get into all of this. To help me break it down, a guy who got to watch it during the day and got family time at night because of the special start time. Follow him on Twitter, John Morgan _MMA. His name is John Morgan. What's up, brother?
Not much, man. You know I love doing this show each and every week, man. You know I love getting with you and talking about fights, but when it's after a UFC pay-per-view, it just seems like the energy is that much higher. There's so many more things to talk about. And, man, all the little storylines you were kind of hinting at and touching on, this was such a wild card, man. It was kind of chaotic leading into it with all the change-up of the main and co-main event. And then there was so much like chaos on the undercard as well. So just so much to talk about coming out of UFC 294.
Well, let's just go get right into it. We're going to start at the top. Islam Makhachev TKOs Alexander Volkanovski at 3 minutes and 6 seconds of the very first round. Head kick led to the knockdown, led to the ground and pound finish. Were you surprised?
Absolutely. I was not necessarily surprised in who got their hand raised after the fight was over. I was just surprised that Islam Makhachev got it done in that dominant of fashion. You know, this was such a closely contested fight the first time around, and I thought it was going to be at least somewhat like that as well, and it just really wasn't. It was Islam dominating from the start, and I guess I wouldn't really say dominating him, but he was kind of controlling the pace early on, setting things up, and when you hit a shot like that so early on, I mean, it just feels like, you know, Alexander Volkanovski never really got going. So, you know, kind of the winner that I thought was going to be was the one that ended up having his hand raised, but man, I did not see first round high kick knockout from Islam Makhachev. That was incredible and man, just well placed, because man, you go back and watch that highlight, if Volkanovski had the hand up, he was trying to defend, but it just right over his hand, flushed to the temple, and that kind of led to the finish on the ground, and just great performance from Islam.
He's good. He is good. He's good, right? Now, we talked last week and we were both in agreement. I brought up I put my analyst hat on and I said, listen, based off of fight number one, his path to victory is going to be strikes, right?
Yep.
I thought it was going to be strikes with these bad boys right here.
I did
the
too.
Knuckles, right?
Yep.
But if you watch this and now putting all the pieces together, I think Islam saw this way of victory early, right? He says, I'm going to take you down and smash you. I'm going to get the finish, right? And so you naturally bring your hands down a little bit when you hear stuff like that, right? And then he invested into the body a little bit on a few early occasions, which that brings those hands down a little bit. Now, you're right, the hand did come up, but it wasn't flush here like a lot of fighters will be like this. Right. It came up as it was going, and it still came over, and it wasn't a cracking shot across the head. It was almost one of those skipping shots off the head. So I say all that to be like, maybe he's just not a great fighter in Islam Makhachev. Maybe he's a great, like, X's and O's guy too.
Yeah, and I think you got to give credit to the team around him, including Khabib, you know, who's not necessarily in his corner all the time, but is still always talking about him. And man, when you hear Khabib break down tape, it's unbelievable. But you got to give Javier Mendez credit, just the whole squad for putting it together, because I think you laid it out perfectly. I think it's what's so important to see, right? Because, you know, a lot of people might just see the high kick and be like, well, he threw it up there and he landed it. And so, yeah, I guess that just happens in fights sometimes, which can. But exactly what you said, he set it up. It's not as if it was just some wild shot that he just threw out of desperation. Oh, my gosh, it happened to land. Oh, well, let's do that. No, it was like, I'm going to set you up. I'm going to get you from the beginning. You're going to think that I'm going to be worried about the takedown and that I'm going to be looking to shoot. So as you said, you're already going to have that little bit lower stance. Then I'm going to kick the legs a little bit. Then I'm going to kick the body a little bit just to get your hands down a little bit further. And so that when you see my kick come up, you don't immediately think it's going high. You think maybe it's going to the leg again. Maybe it's going to the body again. So to set up that much in such a relatively short period of time, unbelievable. And man, you're right. Islam is sticking to game plans as well, and that just comes from that veteran savvy, right? We talk about it all the time, and you're actually in the cage, so you get to feel it. I'm the one on the outside, but I'm sitting awfully close to it. But a cage fight, a mixed martial arts match, is chaotic, right? But when you have reached that elite level where you can be calm, where you can be relaxed in there, where you can set things up, where you can trust things and believe in yourself to set things up for later in the fight, that's when you become truly great. And Islam is truly great. And I'm going to say this, the official UFC rankings haven't come out just yet, but I had to put him number one pound for pound. I had John Jones pound for pound number one in my rankings, and I may give him pound for pound number one back if he's able to beat Stipe in Madison Square Garden. But man, when you just look at those two bodies of work side by side against each other, I still believe John Jones is the greatest of all time. But as far as right now, who's number one pound for pound on the planet, in my vote this week, I had to put Islam Makhachev.
That's interesting over John Jones. I'm not saying you're right, not saying you're wrong, but it makes sense because everything is subjective and everything is timely, right? So, what sticks in your head most, guy who just took out, arguably the number one pound for pound, even though he was at 3, some had him at 2. But everybody considered him obviously the greatest bantamweight of all time. And everybody, and most people, not me, but most people thought he won that first fight. So to you elevating him number one, I really don't have a problem with it. And I don't think anybody outside of maybe John Jones has a problem.
I know John Jones might have a problem with it, and listen, it's with all respect. Like I said, I do believe John Jones is the greatest of all time. And so I had him in that number one spot when he came back after the layoff. But I was just doing my rankings this last week, and after the fights were over, and I have a little spreadsheet where I keep track of everybody's results, so I can really compare them side by side, right? And I really factor in what's happened most recently. And if you look, I keep the last three years worth of results tied next to that person, right? On John Jones, there's one line under the last 3 years of work. It's a win over Cyril Gane. Impressive. I mean, he moved up to heavyweight. He captured the heavyweight title. He dominated Cyril Gane. And again, I believe John Jones is the greatest of all time. But when I look at the list underneath Islam Makhachev, win over Alexander Volkanovski, win over Alexander Volkanovski, win over Charles Oliveira, just that right there, you're talking about 2 of the best pound for pound on the planet right there, and to have 3 victories over those 2 right there. And then, maybe you get into say, well, Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, Thiago Moises, Drew Dober. Okay, those aren't pound for pound, but they're all very, very talented athletes. But you look at how busy he's been, who he's beating right now, the way he's winning these fights. I mean, finishing Charles Oliveira, finishing Alexander Volkanovski. Those are other guys on the pound for pound list right now. So I did not take that decision lightly, and it does not minimize what I think of John Jones. It's just I look at that body of work and I say, man, how can you deny it?
Did you watch the embeddeds? I love UFC embeddeds, right? I love how they did it. Did you watch them all?
Absolutely.
We talked 2 weeks ago, maybe last. Was it? No, it was 2 weeks ago about who was the best lightweight in the world. Was it his teammate or was it Islam? Right. So was it Usman or was it Islam? And we both said something. We're like, well, hard to tell. Each person, one may be better on their feet, which is Usman. Mm-hmm. We might have to rethink that.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
But furthermore, we just said, well, Islam may have more power on the feet, which may equal him out. That proved significant. But we also said we think Usman was the bigger guy. I was watching this embedded, and Usman was there training with him.
Right.
In Habib's gym in Abu Dhabi, which is spectacular, by the way. That
amazing
gym.
Facility.
Usman was taller than him, standing side by side. Did you notice that? That was a glaring. I was like, me and John were wrong about who was the bigger fighter. Usman is just as big and a little bit taller than Islam Makhachev. That blew my mind.
It did surprise me a little bit because you're right. I haven't spent as much time around Usman Nurmagomedov side by side. I've covered his fights and I've been to him at press conferences, but I just haven't been next to him as much as I've been with Islam Makhachev and through his career. And so it really was kind of a little bit jarring to see as well. But it just goes to show you how incredible Usman Nurmagomedov is as well. What a force that guy is. And man, there's going to be some real interesting shuffles coming up real quick. We know we've got another Bellator event, but Showtime went ahead and made the announcement, right? We've been talking about it for a while. Showtime just came out and said, like, look, we're done with MMA. We're done with combat sports in general. So, we know something, even though we've kind of known for a while that something is happening with Bellator.
Yeah, let's
Now
just
we
add
know
something
even
else to throw
more.
on that wall.
Yeah, now we know even more. But I'm telling you what, there's going to be some top talents at the top of those, different weight classes that end up in some real interesting scenarios soon. So there's going to be some fun fights coming up on the horizon whenever all that stuff figures out. And Usman's going to be one of those guys. You're going to be real interested to see where he goes.
And I didn't mean for us to take a swerve there because, but it was just something that, like, when I was watching this embedded, I was like, what? Oh my God. Like it just, which just is just more impressive of how good that camp is. And if your name ends with a V, chalk it up to you're getting a victory in those big promotions, right? On those big cards. But that begs the question, right? What's next for Islam Makhachev? Charles, Gaethje, or 85? My opinion in the matter is, now I want to take a step back. Usually we'd break down the fight. There wasn't much to break down. We said it. He invested in the body, went boom up high, showed he was superior, and showed that his path to striking victory, which we both thought was the way to victory, proved right. We didn't see it in that fashion. So we can't break down any more of that fight. So if you're here for a stylistic breakdown, we didn't have much to go off of, right? There was your stylistic breakdown. But now we have to look forward. Islam Makhachev, you have him number one pound for pound. The body at work as a champion at 55, there isn't much there because his two victories have come against a traditional 45er, albeit the greatest that ever did it at 45, right? But we were wanting to see Oliveira, or now Gaethje's name is really being thrown into that shuffle. And Islam even says, like, I just don't think Charles, like, I don't think that's the fight to make. So then if it's not, is it Gaethje or is it going up to 85? It's hard for me to justify him going up to 85 and challenging the winner there without defending his title against a traditional 50 fighter. What say you?
Well, just to make sure the record reflect, it's 70. He'd be going up to 70, but I know what
you
meant.
I'm sorry, 70. I'm sorry.
I didn't want somebody coming and telling you in the comments you were wrong. And
I know they do that.
I want to make sure it's 70. But to answer your question, listen, I'm torn on this, right? Because on the one hand, Charles Oliveira, man, he's one of the most exciting guys in the division. He came back, he got the win over Beneil Dariush, where he looked very impressive. He had this fight lined up, and then he had this nasty cut that he suffered in training. And you hate to just take something away that's been promised simply because of an accident that happened in training. That said, there's a big part of me that would really like to see Justin Gaethje in here, right? Because it's a fresh matchup, right? We haven't seen that, and what Justin Gaethje brings to the table is fun, right? I mean, that dude has great defensive wrestling, and then he has just insane power, right? So, would he bring the type of grappling skills to the table that Charles Oliveira does? No, but we already saw how that played out.
He was a D1 wrestler or a 1AA at the time wrestler.
That's it. Exactly. And so, and he's got great defensive wrestling. I think if it got to the ground, he wouldn't enjoy being there. I don't think that's where he'd want the fight to take place. But the nasty leg kicks he has, the aggression, the power that he packs in his hands, there's something to me that would like to see that. So I think the fan inside me, if I'm being honest, wants to see the Justin Gaethje matchup more. But I guess just the guy says I don't want it to go away from Charles Oliveira simply because it was already promised to him and it was there. I mean, look, things change, schedules change, and who knows how that cut heals up, and maybe another injury comes in play. So there's a million variables that can happen along the way that could change this. But yeah, if you're just asking me which one I'm most interested in seeing right now, if I'm being honest, I think it's Justin Gaethje.
UFC does what's right for business. What's right for business, and Charles Oliveira, you proved it against Justin Gaethje. You proved that should be your spot.
Yep.
Charles Oliveira, you proved it against Beneil Dariush that should be your spot. But sometimes it just doesn't work that way. And the fans are behind Justin Gaethje. The chatter is behind Justin Gaethje. And to Khabib's own words, he's the hardest hitter that he's ever gone against.
Yep.
That alone almost could catapult him up into there. So what do I think the fight to make is spot on with you. The fans want it. The freshness of it dictates it. It kind of has to be Justin Gaethje, right? It has to be.
I mean, and let's not forget as well, Ali Abdelaziz from Dominance MMA is the manager of both Islam Makhachev and Justin Gaethje. So
Double
it's
payday.
like, yeah, like, hold on, man, we don't even have to work with anybody else. Like, I can make this all happen for you. So that's going to make it easy. So listen, I think there's going to be a lot of push there, but Dana White afterwards was asked, and he did say, I think you go with Charles. But I will always preface it by saying, remember, when Dana says something immediately after a pay-per-view, unless he tells you we already signed the contract, we've already got a date for it, we're already done, those things are all up for negotiation. They can change. So his initial reaction was the same as mine, which is you can't take it away from Charles Oliveira. You know, this is a guy that's been in the company for more than a decade.
about that one.
Well, yeah, exactly. But things can change, so we'll see. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of public sentiment is gonna settle in on that. And it's not as if, I mean, you could tell Charles Oliveira, hey, listen, you're still next. We're just gonna do this one first, and then you got the winner of that. You know what I mean? So there's ways you can make this happen. The fan of me wants to see the Gaethje matchup next.
Yeah, and when you start me too. Let's be honest, like. But I just have to play devil's advocate just because that's what you have to do when looking at this. Beneil Dariush, dominant victory. Wasn't even competitive, which was I thought Dariush was on a collision course with Islam Makhachev. I really did. And that fight wasn't competitive, which just shows you how sneakily awesome Charles Oliveira is. Charles Oliveira knocked out Justin Gaethje. He didn't take him down and do some wizard jiu-jitsu on him. He stopped him. So that's, yeah, to your point, like, yeah, he earned it. But so did Dricus. And Dricus is the odd man out right now. It just kind of sometimes it crumbles in that direction. And
timing is everything
for Oliveira, I think it's crumbling in that direction.
Timing is absolutely everything, right? I mean, you never know what circumstances are there. It's one of the reasons you never want to pass up on a title shot if you get an opportunity. I mean, that's been preached over the years, but it's 100% true. Maybe the scenario is not exactly ideal for you, but never say no, because you never know when it's going to swing back in your direction. So you are 100% right, man. It's all about timing, and the timing might be pointing towards Justin Gaethje right now.
So that is what Makhachev has on the horizon. It's either going to be Oliveira or Makhachev, or Justin Gaethje. I don't think him moving up to 70 is in the plans right now, although it might be his plans. Like, I don't see the UFC really doing that. But again, timing. I mean, what happens? There's a dance card open with Leon and Colby coming. Like, who knows at this point, really?
And you know what? To your point right there, because Islam has mentioned the idea of going to 70 and being a double champ. We know how hard his weight cuts are. Maybe that's another reason for him that Gaethje would be more exciting right now, right? Because if you beat Oliveira again, people still say, yeah, but you haven't beat Gaethje yet. You can't go up to 70. But if he beats Gaethje, I think it would be real easy for Islam to step back and go like, guys, you gave me Oliveira. I took care of him. You gave me Gaethje. I took care of him. There's nobody else here for me right now. I got to go up to 70 because that's where the real challenges are for me. And you'd have a hard time arguing, because sometimes when people want to move up a weight class, you're like, yeah, but hang on, man. We still got some really interesting fights here. I mean, look at the number 1 contender. Look at the number 2 contender. I mean, there's some matchups we want to see. But if he says, look, I took out Oliveira and I took out Gaethje, what do you want from me, man? I'm going up to 70. It'd be hard to argue with them.
Yeah, if you clean out the people who cleaned out the division, and if you clean them out handily, which he did, Charles, to win the title, and if he does that to Gaethje, I mean, who knows? I think it's there, but I don't know. Who knows? I'm not in that war room. If I was in that war room, I truly believe it's Justin Gaethje, and then it's the winner of Leon Colby, and that's probably the fan in me as well.
Of course, but that's an awesome path, though, right? I mean, that would be a pretty incredible run, man, for Islam to prove his greatness. Man, that would be a pretty amazing run.
You know what? And if he does that, he's on Khabib level now.
I know, right? It's amazing. He doesn't have that spotless. He had that one knockout loss way back in the day, so he doesn't have that perfect record. But man, it is hard to argue with the track record of success he has had since. Man, that is crazy. And how amazing is? I mean, we're talking about, the room that they have right now with Islam and Usman Nurmagomedov. But I mean, how about the fact that Islam and Habib, grew up together, training together from the time they were kids? I mean, what talent, man.
And father's plan. Talk about father's plan. And he was always saying that Islam was probably the best one out of everybody. That's what Habib's father was saying 10 years ago. Watch out for this kid. You're talking about my son? Wait until you see the guy behind him.
Unbelievable. Absolutely worth, giving another nod to Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, man, the greatness that he instilled in both those guys. And you're right, man. He said it from the beginning, and I always thought, you're just trying to build the guy up. You got your son over here. Your son knows, so you got to take care of this guy and build his ego. Oh, nope, that wasn't it. It was actually the truth, man.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing what that man instilled in those two. And just the characters they are, the morals and the integrity that they have and the example they're trying to set, man.
And the sneaky shit talk that they have, though.
Oh, yeah.
Very sneaky.
I love it. A little subtle. Just subtle,
I smash him. Yeah. Take him down, finish. It's all good. It's so dismissive. It's so dismissive, but yet not talking crap. But you say it in a way that's so dismissive. It's absolutely talking crap.
Love it.
All right, but listen, we can sing the praises of Islam all day long. I mean, we can do a whole hour on just how awesome he is. Post-fight, Volkanovski, it got a little dark, and I want to chalk it up to, like, you have to take this serious, but then I also want to chalk it up to, you're saying to this after a guy who just got finished and just got knocked out, and you're in the down, and highest of highs in this sport, lowest of lows. So it's hard to put where, like, his mental psyche at that time. But essentially what he came out and said is, like, I wasn't training hard for this fight. I wasn't training necessarily like I should have in between camps. But when this came across, I wasn't in the best mental space. And I said yes, because I have to stay active. And if I don't stay active, now I'm paraphrasing, and I'm implying a little bit here, but if I'm not staying active and I'm not in camp and I'm not doing this, then my mind really wanders to some places it really shouldn't. I don't know. Put your John Morgan spin on it.
Yeah, man, it was kind of hard to watch, right? The emotions that are coming out. And I think you framed it perfectly, right? That speaking to somebody immediately after a high-profile loss, a knockout loss at that, probably some concussion symptoms in there that can factor in as well. It's tough, man. It's a cliche in the sport when we say it's the highest of highs and lowest of lows, but it is the absolute truth, man. It is crazy. You either on top of the world or you at the very bottom of it. And what's crazy is fighters like that always feel like they let down everybody around them, right? How many times have you seen a fighter lost and they apologize to their coaches and they apologize to their teammates and they apologize to their family? And it's like, bro, you got nothing to apologize for, man. You're the one that went in there and laid it all on the line and got out there and did what 99.9% of the world will never do. So, yeah, it was hard to see, man. And I hope that Volkanovski rebounds from that. A big spotlight is being put on it right now, and hopefully those around him are looking out for him. There's a real big question of whether or not he should compete in January against Ilia Topuria, which he wants to do. You wonder if that's in his best physical and mental interest as well. There's a lot to figure out there. But it was tough. But, I think Volkanovski deserves a lot of praise, man. I think, for being willing to step up and do this, for taking this challenge, for being willing to put his own legacy on the line. I think he deserves a lot of praise, and it takes away nothing from what he's accomplished at 145 pounds, man. The dude is, as you said, if not the best featherweight to ever do it, he's at least in the conversation. I mean, Jose Aldo, obviously a phenomenal athlete as well. I mean, Max Holloway, a great champion. Conor McGregor, of course, didn't have the length of tenure, but obviously one of the biggest star in the history of the sport. But Volkanovski's incredible, man, and I have all the respect in the world for him for taking this challenge and taking this opportunity, and hopefully he's able to go back and start another run at 45.
Okay, so I didn't put this on our talking points, but you brought up Jose Aldo, so let's put it out there. Bodies of work. Is Volk the best 45er ever? I don't like to say this against Jose Aldo, but he was up and down later on in his career, and it's amazing that what he still did. But like I think peak Aldo and peak Volkanovski, from the way that they fight, I think I just have to give, and I hate that I'm doing this because I've always held Jose Aldo in such high regard, but I just like peak both of them. I think peak Volk is just a different type of monster.
I would agree, and I think that just goes to do with the evolution of the sport, right? The athletes as a whole, the level just keeps getting higher and higher because you're right. It's like discussing Anderson Silva's career. Are we talking about the thing as a whole and what happened at the end, or are we talking about the prime era, right? Because if you're talking about like 2009 to 2014 Jose Aldo, where you're talking about the WEC run that he had and like, the scary knockout of Cub Swanson. I mean, the win over Mike Brown, the win over Uriah Faber, Gamburian. Then he comes to the UFC, Homnick, Florian. The Chad Mendez fights were incredible. You know what I mean? Frankie Edgar in there as well. So I mean, prime Aldo was something special. But if we're playing EA UFC 5 that's coming out this week, and we're putting vintage Jose Aldo against vintage Alexander Volkanovski, who do I think wins in the simulation? Maybe Volkanovski.
Who do you just think is considered best in their prime? I mean, because you look at it like you probably are going to be asked this question a lot from this point moving forward. Who's the best 45er of all time?
Oh, it's so hard to not say Jose Aldo. That dude was on a different planet, but the sport evolves, right? I think maybe Alexander Volkanovski, man. I think maybe Alexander Volkanovski, but it's so hard to not. If you didn't live the vintage Jose Aldo era, man, like that dude was a savage.
Oh, dude. And that's why I said I hate to do it, but I think this pedestal that Volk has been put on now really, I mean, let's be honest, he's earned that pedestal, but Volkanovski, when you hear other, I've never heard this in the history of this game, and I'm hearing it repeatedly right now. When fighters are saying, I'm not ready for Volkanovski, but I will be, but I'm not ready for him yet. That is a different type of level of respect than you hear in this game. Because in this game, it's like, oh, give me anybody. I want the champion right now. And when they're clearly not ready. But when you have fighters in this game saying, I'm not ready for Volk yet, that's crazy for fighters to say.
That's a different level of respect, right? And look, I mean, because the argument is it Aldo? Is it Holloway? It's really Aldo and Volkanovski, I think. But Aldo, Holloway, and Volkanovski all are in the conversation of the greatest featherweight ever. Now, Conor McGregor obviously deserves mention as again, what he accomplished was insane, but he didn't have the tenure. He never defended the title and that sort of thing. So I think it boils down to those three. And if you boil it down to those three, Volkanovski does have the head-to-head wins over both of them. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard to argue against them. But like I said, that 2009 to 2014 WEC early UFC era Jose Aldo was insane. But I think the sport moves on. The sport evolves. The level as a whole gets better. And so for that reason, I'd probably say Volkanovski is the greatest featherweight of all time.
But he does have a test coming up. He does. And that's almost why, to me, you said, you'd like to maybe not see him. I want to see him. To his point, I need to stay busy. If anything is going to light a fire, it's coming off of something like this. Now he is going to have to serve at minimum of probably a 45 to 60 day suspension to get any contact. I don't really think that's abided by all that much, but at least competition wise, a commission isn't going to go about. But I think Topuria is that good that he can compete. That is a test.
It's a real test, and that's why I'm a little concerned. I don't think that shouldn't be the next fight. I think it absolutely should. But, originally the plan was let's do this in January. And Volkanovski says afterwards, like, hey, I still want to do it in January. I want to stay busy. I still think I can be ready for that. I'll be over my suspension by then. I'll be ready to go. But the only reason it worries me is because of what you said. Topuria is a test. He's a bad man. And what do we know about knockouts, right? Sometimes when you suffer a knockout loss, if you rush back a little bit too quick, you're a little bit more susceptible to that knockout the second time around. So, a little distance between fights should happen. So, maybe we push it to February, maybe we push it to March. I don't know. That's up to Alexander Volkanovski and the people around him to decide. I mean, if they feel they're ready to go in January, then the man has earned the right to call his shots and get exactly what he wants. He's that good. But I just hope everybody around him is saying, hey, is a little bit of patience. I know you need to stay busy. I know there's this mental challenge for you and you need that, but physically, can we make sure that we're at our peak and that we're not risking suffering knockouts and putting that legacy in any terms of jeopardy and that sort of thing? So I just hope
Super Bowl weekend then would be a great card.
Be a phenomenal one. Be an absolutely phenomenal one. So it's going to be a great matchup. I'm excited for it. It's going to be a great fight. look, I mean, I respect Volkanovski for taking this challenge. Dude, the size difference between him and Islam Makhachev is insane when you see them
But did you
standing
see how
next to each
much
other.
Volk had to cut?
Oh, I know.
25 pounds week of 25 pounds in the 1 week.
That's a lot. That is a
That's
ton,
how
especially for a
big
man.
he is walking
Especially for a
around.
man of that size. Especially for a man of that size. So, yeah, a lot of factors were against him.
Before we move on to the co-main event, I do just want to touch on one little point, and I've seen a lot of chatter online where people were like, now maybe sour grapes, but a lot of people were saying like those finishing shots were to the back of the head. I want to say they weren't, right? Definitively they weren't, right? And this is where I'm going to put my ref cap on and tell people what they think the rule is to what the real rule is. Okay. A lot of people think the back of the head is, I don't know if you can see, I'm going to turn around, right? And the back of the head is just from here down. That's not the rule.
Not true.
It's not true. These quadrants right here and right here are still legal as long as it's not touching the mohawk. And then if it gets to the ear down, now that's back of the head. So a shot can come right here and a shot can come right here and it's still legal as long as it's not attached to like the spine all the way up to the top of the head and then below the ear is completely back of the head. So those shots were legal.
Yep.
Just
100%.
I wanted to let people know what the exact rule is. They say back of the head shots, but quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 are still legal.
Yep. And I've seen some of those same protests online, and you never know, like you said, is it just sour grapes? Is it maybe somebody just trolling a little bit, just trying to stir some controversy up? But I agree with you. No controversy to be had.
All right, good. Bam, I got to put my ref cap on. I love when I do that, right?
Yes, sir.
So now we're going to put it on later, too. All right, let's go into the co-main event. Khamzat Chimaev wins via majority decision over Kamaru Usman. Very game Kamaru Usman on 10 days' notice. Dominant round 1. We said what the round 1. I even said that first minute or two of round 1 is going to tell a big story, and we got a big answer in round 1, 10-8 round, Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah, I had no issue with that being a 10-8. I think Usman deserves a lot of credit for surviving there. I tweeted during it as I was watching live, man, you really see that championship pedigree, right? Because he was in some bad spots, but he didn't panic. He did everything technically right to get himself and survive in those situations. Wasn't able to necessarily reverse the situation, but at least was able to survive in there where a lot of people kind of panic and get taken advantage of there. But that to me is a 10-8. I saw some people saying, there wasn't enough damage for a 10-8. But remember, when you've got domination.
We talked the criteria just
that's it.
1 month ago.
That's it. When you've got domination and duration.
Duration and control.
That's it. So you've got the domination, you've got the duration. Felt to me like that fight could be. I mean, I was surprised it went to a round 2, so I had no issue with the 10-8s, and it was 10-8 across the board in round 1.
Yeah, no problem whatsoever. 2 and 3, very highly competitive. It's hard to really dig out of a hole like that, especially in a 3-round fight, and that's where I think all of us were just dying for a 4th and a 5th because I truly believe if there was a 4th and a 5th, we may be singing a different tune. And
I agree.
Right? So woulda, coulda, shoulda, coulda all day long in that fight. But here's one thing that I need to say is Khamzat a better pure wrestler than Kamaru Usman? I mean, he took him down twice in that first round. But this is where I need to kind of put an analyst cap on. And I don't know if you agree with this or not, but this was glaring to me when I see it. When you have guys, let's call Khamzat just a little bit better, right? Not a lot, just a little bit. But when your wrestling is a little bit better, but then your jiu-jitsu is worlds better, that is to me what happened in round number 1. And I'll tell you why. Because he got that takedown. And it's not like he didn't take him against the cage and he didn't drag him down like you see a lot of takedowns. He dove for that single leg, right? And he got that and he able to get kind of take him down. At that point, Kamaru Usman bounced right back up and then got taken down again. And now here's the tell. Wrestlers don't mind going to all fours and getting up that way. Okay? Because their scrambling ability, we said this on the show, their scrambling better, their get up position, they're able to fight hands and push hands off and able to get up. And now when a wrestler gets somebody in that position, they put a single hook in. Now, a lot of people think that that's jujitsu. It's really not. It's just for control. That's old school wrestling. You're locking down one of the hips, which makes it harder for somebody to get up. Okay. Kamaru Usman did that. Khamzat put the single hook in. We're still wrestling at this point, right? We're not doing jujitsu yet, if we're going to be really technically honest. And what most jujitsu practitioners will do is they use that single hook to pull the person on top of them to get that other hook in. That's not what Chimaev did here. Okay, what he did is he waited just for Usman to try and stand up again like he did the first time. And right when he did, bam, that second hook came in, and then he got flattened down. That is the difference when the wrestling is relatively on par or one is a little bit better than the other. But the jiu-jitsu worlds were so far apart, and that was apparent in that first round. You agree?
Yeah, I agree, man. That's what makes Khamzat so scary. Is just the way he changed things together, right? And then the way that he'll just continue to swarm on you. The other thing, and listen, 7 years difference between them, right? A lot more miles than that Kamaru Usman body, right? And I think maybe, about to say, and maybe I think something to be said for Usman is used to those 5-round fights, right? He's been in championship fights for so long. He's used to a pace where it's like, hold on, we got to keep ourselves good for 25, whereas Khamzat's used to coming in and just destroying people in like 30 seconds, right? So he's going all out. He's all gas from the opening minute. So I think that's a lot of what you saw in that opening round. But as far as a technical breakdown, you're spot on with that assessment.
Yeah, when I jumped down, I was just like, oh, man. When I watched it, I said, dude, that guy, he can chain wrestling. It's very hard to chain wrestling and jiu-jitsu together. You're either a dominant wrestler and you're pretty decent at jiu-jitsu, but to change those subtleties like that is very impressive. It's next to never seen. I don't know anybody who does that. Maybe Habib, but his jiu-jitsu was almost catch wrestling. Wrestling with submissions. So, but Khamzat was like pure technical, high level, black belt, world championship jiu-jitsu on top of that world level wrestling. It blew my mind. I knew he was good at both, but to do that against a Kamaru Usman fresh, and we don't even take a short camp into consideration at that point because we haven't even got to a point where you got to be tired yet.
Exactly, right? That was later in the fight. Unbelievable. No, what you saw in the opening 5 minutes there is why Khamzat is such a scary individual to match up with.
But what you saw in the remaining 10 is why there still may be question marks about him. I don't really have question marks about him, but a lot of people do, right? But I do think the way the trajectory of that fight was going, 5 rounds was definitely, even on a short camp, was going to play into Kamaru Usman's favor.
Yeah, because you could see it right at the beginning of round 2. I mean, from the beginning. Now, it turns out that it sounds like Khamzat broke his hand in the opening round, and so that factored into maybe why he wasn't able to grapple quite as effectively. But it did seem like there was a marked change in the aggression and the pace and the output level from Khamzat Chimaev. So, as you said, I wouldn't say questions and like, oh, is this guy really that good? No, the guy's really that good. But if you're looking to game plan around him, it's like, all right, look, we know the fire of hell is coming in those opening 5 minutes, and we got to be ready for it. If you're Sean Strickland right now, who it looks like that's going to be the next fight, we'll see if it is or not. But that was the promise going in, is that the winner would get a title shot. If you're Sean Strickland right now, you're Eric Nixick, who's game planning, you're automatically thinking, look, we got to survive the first 5. We know what's coming. We got to survive that. But then I think we start seeing some opportunities in rounds 2, 3, and 4 and 5. If we'd have seen it here on Saturday night, I think they really would have gone in Usman's favor.
I really do too. I want to see it. I almost want to see a rematch of that.
I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it. And listen, I don't think I was watching the press conference afterwards. I don't think that it got asked. And I think maybe it's because people just assume, but nobody got confirmation from Dana White that we're definitely doing Khamzat next, right? And you do kind of wonder, I mean, that was the promise going in. Winner of this gets a middleweight title shot, right? And it was a big win. It was the most significant win of Khamzat Chimaev's career.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't think it was the type of win where you walk away going, got to give that dude the title shot next. Like, bro, there's just no reason, especially knowing you got Dricus du Plessis out there who had that amazing win over Robert Whittaker and who wasn't ready to take the title shot when Sean Strickland was. But how do you skip over him now? And so I think the real key thing to focus on is going to be, how bad is this hand for Khamzat Chimaev? Because if it's not that bad, they probably do go with Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, he's a marketable commodity. There's no question about it. He moves the needle. He's got the star power. But honestly, if we're talking about the performance that got you there, how do you not look at Dricus du Plessis in his last win and say, I mean, that's great. And again, you just said it. Let's put Khamzat and Usman back together for 5 rounds. Khamzat says he'll fight anybody. Why don't we do this again just so there's no question marks? Or maybe there's another matchup that's out there. Who knows? So this is kind of an interesting situation because, again, we know the UFC and the way matchmaking done isn't necessarily just about who most deserves it. It's all not about meritocracy, right? It's about what's going to sell tickets and what's going to move the needle. And Khamzat moves the needle. But I have a hard time arguing right now against Dricus du Plessis having the next title shot.
I mean, odd man out, but could be a product of great timing now that the hand is in question. I'll tell you, if you have a hand injury, my last fight, I got 9 screws and a plate input in my hand, and my hand has never been the same, one. Number two, I was in a cast for 6 weeks, right? So that poses a lot of problems for the UFC. So with that being said, the aforementioned Sean Strickland was on a podcast this past weekend, and he says that Khamzat does not deserve the title shot, but he'll fight him anyways because he sells pay-per-views. And then he brought up some interesting past history. Did you see this?
I did not. I saw some of the quotes, but I didn't see the full interview.
I didn't see the full interview either. Disclaimer. But I saw the good quotes, right? But I did watch the clip, right? And the clip said that he goes, well, me and Khamzat, we're not the same. I'll fight him to the death right here, right now. That he made some, him being Strickland, pronouns, pal. He made some comment that about Chechnyan fighters, which Khamzat apparently took issue with and messaged him basically John at him. And Strickland was like, well, you misunderstood what I was saying because I was actually giving compliments to Chechnyan fighters, but I'll be at this place. They're both in the same town. I guess they were both in Vegas at the time or something like that. And he goes, I'll be here at 3:00. We can go all out as long as you want. I'll let you fight me for it. And no gloves, whichever you want. I'll be here at 3:00. He says, Khamzat no showed. And then messaged him saying, hey, we're all good. I misunderstood. And he goes, so if you think we're the same, we are not the same. I will fight him right here and now to the death. I don't think he'd fight me to the death.
That's Sean Strickland right there, though, man. That man talks wild because he's more than willing to write any check that he needs to cover what his mouth has said. You know what I'm saying? That dude loves to fight, and I believe it. And I think that's key. And look, I think that could be because on paper you're going to say this. I mean, listen, when Adesanya fought Strickland, we all said Strickland has a better chance.
I think Strickland is a huge problem for Khamzat.
Well, I was just going to say a lot of people are going to look at it and be like, oh, Khamzat's just going to run right through that guy. Strickland, and they've actually trained together a little bit, so it's not exactly like it's a completely like unknown commodity, because that's the weirdest thing, right? When you're getting ready for a fight or you're getting ready for any match, whether it be a grappling match or whatever, if you've never gone with that person, you're like, I don't know how strong they are, like, I don't know how fast they are, and all those things get in your head where you're like, that dude's probably going to be way stronger than me, that dude's probably going to be way faster. But if you've gone together, the mystery's not there anymore. So now it's no more of this, the unknown. I got to figure out, and I got to deal with those variables in my head. Now and it's just about, okay, I know he likes to do this, I have to counter with this. I know he's going to move this way, I have to counter this way. And again, now we're talking about gas tanks, and we're talking about, this is a title fight. So it's not 5 rounds, it's not 3 rounds, it's going to be 5 rounds. So you're going to get those opportunities. Look, Sean Strickland, I think, has a lot better chance than people might suggest. And I did see, by the way, there was an early line put out on that fight. And I think it started out with Khamzat as like minus 300, and it was immediately hammered and bet down to like minus 160, because I think a lot of people looked at that and said, what? You're going to give me Sean Strickland at plus 250, 260? I'll take that. So
yeah, I mean, I don't bet on fights anymore, but yeah, if I was betting, I would too. I mean, you take that flyer. I mean, that's a risky dog to take. I mean, he already proved it. He is hard to take down. I do think Khamzat will take him down in round 1. He survives round 1. Let's say he survives round 1 and 2. That's a long remaining 3 rounds for Khamzat Chimaev.
Yep, it really is. Intriguing. If that's the matchup we come with next, I'm excited for it. Like I said, still feel a little bit bad for Dricus du Plessis hanging out in South Africa right now, just going, "Hey guys, remember me? Remember me? I'm the guy that flattened Robert Whittaker. What do I got to do?"
In a weird way, I think that DDP is going to get the next shot just because the hand, if it is in fact broken, first I heard it was broken, then I heard it was rumored to be broken. Who knows? Is it broken?
I don't know. That was the initial report that I heard as well. I don't know that he's had any follow-ups yet. But yeah, if there's a hand injury, the UFC finds himself in a very nice place in the fact that, because if you can't go with Khamzat Chimaev and you're like, well, DDP is our second option, boy, that's a heck of a backup, because that guy absolutely deserves being there. I could sit in front of anybody right now and debate on why he actually deserves it more than Khamzat, even though we understand matchmaking has to do with selling tickets and pay-per-views as well. So I understand why they'd go with Khamzat. But if that's your fallback position, that's a hell of a fallback position to go with.
All right. Now let's exciting too, right? So a lot of options at 85 for the UFC. That is a great problem to have. But I do want to move on to good old Johnny Walker. He gets kneed in the head by Ankalaev. And I mean, listen, Dana White, some people blasted the doctor. I'm not going to blast the doctor. You took a knee strike to the head. I don't want to blast that doctor. But if the rumor is like what country you are and you say I'm in the desert, like, maybe let's do a follow-up. And I'm sure there was. I'm sure he was looking at the eyes, whether the people dilated or not dilated. I'm sure all that came into, but there was controversy with that doctor earlier saying you didn't get kicked in the nuts. That adds fuel to the fire, which he did get kicked in the nuts. He had to go to the hospital and had a CAT scan on his nuts because they were swelling up like bowling balls. But let's still get back to Johnny Walker. I could chuck nut shots all day too. But so let's just say the stoppage was justified by the doctor, right? By recommendation of the doctor, because only the referee can stop the fight. So then that comes into the question, like explain to me, because as a ref, I can't explain to people like why it's a no contest. And well, the only reason is because you want to give yourself an out and not have anybody really necessarily pissed off at you. You don't want to make that definitive decision. But I say it in fighter meetings all the time. If you don't know if the hand is down, don't throw it. If you can't see if the hand is down, don't throw it. If you're not sure if it's weight bearing or not, don't throw it. Right? And I say to the other fighter, hey, listen, if you want to be grounded, ground yourself. Don't play this hand on the ground. Don't play the fingertip game. Don't just ground yourself. If you want to ground yourself, you do not want to take a knee to the head, ground yourself. Johnny Walker was 100% down. That knee strike came. Now, whether he was like maliciously intending to do it, by his knee being on the ground, clearly, there's no way you can argue that it might have been up. It might have been down, his hand down. That's out of the equation. When that knee comes, guess what? It is by definition an intentional knee, because you intended to throw that knee. He was down. I don't care what your mind is saying. Your body did it. It is an intentional blow. It should have been a disqualification win for Johnny Walker.
I actually agree with that. And I think that the intent part of the rule is what throws confusion in sometimes, because it's like, well, no, I didn't intentionally foul. You know what I mean? It's like, well, but you lined up a target. You threw at the target and you landed at the target. Unfortunately, that target should have been off limits to you because your opponent was clearly grounded in a kneeling position right there.
You intended to throw the shot. Whether you intended it for it to be illegal or not, that's irrelevant.
100%. And I think that's what gets, confusion sometimes when people are trying to understand that rule. But to me, I agree with you. And that's not, I think Magomed Ankalaev is a dirty fighter or anything like that. It's just that in this
spur of the moment,
situation,
shit happens.
It does. And it's like, and I think the reason that is in there is because, look, there are certain situations where, like, we talk about it, the chaos that's happening and positions are changing and everybody's moving, and I land a shot and, dude, I didn't know your knee was down. We were just standing, and things happen boom, boom, fast, and you go, okay, that was unintentional. But in this situation, it seemed very clearly that he lined up the target and he landed to the target. And so if Johnny Walker can't continue, and I will second your effort here in that I think the doctor really did deserve some real criticism for what he did with Victor Henry. I don't think he necessarily deserved as much criticism for this situation. Maybe having somebody in there that spoke Portuguese would have helped a little bit, just because that's Johnny Walker's first language. But assuming that the stoppage is just, which I didn't necessarily hate, I think this probably should have been a disqualification as well.
Yeah, and it's hard in that situation, not in the earlier fight, but in that situation, it's hard to give the doctor a hard time because safety of the fighter is paramount. That's rule number one. That's what everything outside of the fight is based around, is protecting these fighters as much as we can. And you take an unobstructed knee by a big man to your dome.
It's weird, right? Because at first, Johnny Walker, when they stopped the action, Johnny Walker kind of protests like, dude, what was that? Like, you definitely hit me illegal. But then when he got to the side and the doctor was talking to him, and, I think he did say, where are you? And you could see it that Johnny just kind of had this blank stare. Like, he was just kind of looking at, he wasn't actually looking right at the doctor. He took a long time to answer. Eventually, he did say the desert, apparently. I didn't catch that part, but that was what was reported. But there was a time where there was a real pause, and he was just kind of staring off. And even when they waved the fight off, the way Johnny moved forward and was trying, something was off there. So I don't hate the doctor's decision making. The thing I would have liked to have seen is, yes, maybe get somebody in there that does speak Portuguese. It is Johnny Walker's second language. He's learning it. But in the heat of the moment, after you've been buzzed a little bit by a shot to your dome, as you said, maybe having somebody there that speaks the language that you go to first might help a little bit. But ultimately, the no contest, I thought, was a little bit wild. I think that was probably the wrong decision here, if I'm being honest.
I don't think it was the wrong decision. I'm pretty confident in knowing and saying it's the wrong decision. I kind of know why it was done, because you give yourself a little bit of an out, right? So you almost appease everybody in the situation. And now I don't think it's it's just from a simple fact of not knowing the rule. I'm not familiar with that referee who did ref that fight. I mean, he was based, over in, from what I realized, he based over there. Probably refs a lot of UAE Warrior cards and stuff.
Yep.
But and maybe not familiarize yourself with the 100% rule of it. Now, I can say that earlier on in my reffing career, it was a pro fight. I made a wrong call. Something that should have been a disqualification victory. I made a no contest because I just was put in this situation where I'm like, yeah, he did that, but like I didn't like how it happened, so I'm going to make it a no contest when I clearly made the wrong. It should have been a disqualification, but I justified it to myself in a way that I could explain it, but it was the wrong way of doing it. And I almost think that happened here.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. Again, without talking to Dan Moheady, who, like you said, he does do a lot of fights over there in that region. He's done UFC events in the past. You wonder if maybe even he didn't agree with the doctor stoppage or something. So he's like, come on. I think the doctor's making a mistake here. Let's just call this a no contest. I mean, you never know, right? There's not many makeup calls you can make in mixed martial arts, right? We see it in every other sport where you're like, yeah, I think we got that offsides wrong. Or I think we got that blocking wrong down there. Let's call a charge on this end or what have you. You can't do many makeup calls, but this is a situation sometimes where there may be a degree of, I don't necessarily agree with what happened here. So let's just make it a no contest, no harm, no foul. They can rebook it and do it again.
Well, and let's be clear in what we're talking about here, right? A lot of that accidental or unintentional foul, that's more to really in those rules for talking about nut shots and eye pokes, right? And then that fringe, maybe the grounded opponent rule, because that comes in fringe, you're grounded or you're not, right?
Yep.
So what do we mean by unintentional? If a punch is coming at you and you're like, no, trying to block it, but the person's coming into it and your finger goes in, of course that's unintentional.
Or
right?
or the fighter turns their head as you throw a shot, and so it hits to the back of the head, and you're like, wait a minute, I wasn't. You know what I mean? I was throwing the punch to the target, and they moved the target. I didn't. Well, that there on purpose.
In fact, in the rules, that is a legal shot. But if you reach back and throw again, now that's an illegal shot, right? But that and the fight is always moving. So if you throw a low shot and you intended to hit the thigh, but he moved and he closed the distance, and now it hit the groin, that happens. That's that unintentional. But the unintentional on a grounded opponent, it's kind of a makeup call. Let's be honest what you're talking about. So I don't like that unintentional. It's either he was intentionally grounded. He intentionally grounded himself, right? He stayed grounded. You intentionally throwing the knee, whether it was malicious or not, you intentionally threw it. There's only one answer for that.
I agree. Yep, I agree. I think the wrong decision was made here. I think there's a lot of controversy and bizarreness. The 205 division right now is weird. I don't know, man. Maybe just line this thing right back up and
we go
do it
round
at a
three?
later date. I think so. I think you do it again.
I don't know. It might be snake bit. Like I may punt and just be like, hey, maybe we'll do it again in a couple years. But right now it's just a snake bit fight.
Ankalaev just continues to have some weirdness around his career, man. He's had some bizarre issues.
All right. Well, now we're getting ready to wrap up. Those were all the real prominent things, UFC 294 from this past weekend. But this weekend, Francis Ngannou makes his debut in the squared circle, and he takes on none other than the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, the guy who's run through everybody in the division, in Tyson Fury. You want to make a statement, whether you win or not, like you step up to the plate and you go fight Tyson Fury. And that's what Francis Ngannou is doing this weekend from Saudi Arabia.
I love it, man. They're calling it the Battle of the Baddest, man. And it's cool. I'm happy to see this fight come together. We talked about it and I'll just reiterate. Listen, I don't expect it to be super competitive. I just believe Tyson Fury is on an entirely different level when it comes to the sport of boxing, in much the same way that I feel if Tyson Fury came into the mixed martial arts contest with Francis Ngannou, Francis would handle him. So I don't expect it to be competitive, but I'm happy for Francis Ngannou, right? His dream was to become a boxer before he ever became a mixed martial artist, and now he's getting to live that dream. He's making a ton of money to do it by all accounts, so that's great for him as well. And
I heard his payday was over 10 million on this.
Huge, man, which is amazing, right? And then, on top of that, I guess the one part that is intriguing is it is heavyweights, right? I mean, so there is the possibility. One shot can change it. So there is at least that possibility. But what I would encourage anybody to do if you're thinking about putting down the $79.99, if you're thinking about and listen, boy, they picked a great weekend, right? There's no UFC, there's no Bellator, there's no PFL. One Championship has just got the Friday morning card. I mean, they are the center of the combat sports world attention this week. So if you're itching, you're Jones, and you're saying, I got to catch me something, and you're willing to put down that $79.99 to watch it on ESPN Plus pay-per-view, what I would say is just enjoy the spectacle of it all. Know that there's a very real possibility that you're going to watch a one-sided victory from Tyson Fury. But enjoy the spectacle, enjoy the pageantry, realize like this stuff doesn't happen, right? The reigning UFC champion of the world does not leave the organization and go fight the lineal heavyweight boxing champ of the world. It doesn't happen. When Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather fought, I mean, every ounce of me knew that Floyd Mayweather was going to win. But when they were both in the ring at the same time, and I'm sitting there inside T-Mobile Arena, I'm like, are you kidding? Look at what is happening in front of us, man. This is unbelievable. So I would say enjoy that. Realize that you may not get as competitive as a matchup as the marketing might lead you to believe, but it is two very big men who throw very hard, and things can happen when you're talking about heavyweights throwing big punches. I lean Tyson Fury pretty heavily, but it's gonna be wild over there for sure.
I watched their face-to-face interview that they did. I just watched it actually this morning. And Francis Ngannou was like kind of like saying he was going to like Francis was going to try and move a lot because his team requested a 24-foot ring instead of a 20. And Tyson Fury goes, I never requested that. That's just flat out wrong. And he's like, how about this? I won't dance at all. I'll come meet you straight in the middle. All right.
That's amazing. And look, and that's not just false bravado. Like he'll do that, right? And that's what's amazing. It's so frustrating sometimes when boxing fans or purists, like when they comment on the striking of mixed martial artists, and they'll say how it's not nearly as refined. But it is true. I mean, a boxer throws better. There's no question about it. But it's because they don't have to worry about anything else. They don't have to worry about takedowns. They don't have to worry about kicks. They don't worry about knees coming out the middle. So they can do things entirely differently. But as I'm sure you can attest to, man, to get in there with somebody that is a seasoned, really good boxer and to watch the way they pivot and shift and head move and their understanding of distance when they know just the
minuteness of this.
Oh, it's amazing. And Tyson Fury, as huge of a man as he is, he's a really skilled boxer and he does that, right? But again, remember, it's different when there's only two weapons I got to look out for, right? I'm just watching out for a left hand and a right hand. As long as I'm tracking those two weapons, I'm good. I don't have to worry about anything else. But man, when you're good at that, it is infuriating to just be swinging and like, why is this dude standing right in front of me and I can't lay a glove on him because he's just pivoting. He's got one foot down and he's just pivoting and moving and turning and I can't hit him. And why? It's pretty amazing. And Tyson is that good.
Tyson is that good, lineal heavyweight champion for a reason, undefeated in, I think, ever, but I think 11 years since he's been boxing on this level. It's going to be fun to see the battle of the bad, the Gypsy King versus the Predator. We'll talk about it next week. I'm going to be honest. It's not worth $80 to me. This is one.
If you got some buddies you want to have over, maybe everybody can chip in a little bit. You know what I mean? It's funny because I always hear people say like, well, I'll go watch that one at like Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm like, my tab's going to be more than $80 by the time I leave there. If I'm going to do that, I might as well just order it at home. But yeah, this is one of those ones. Again, this is one of those ones that maybe you just have fun. It's on in the middle of the afternoon. You know what I mean? So it's not like you got to carve out your Saturday night to do it. So, if you can find a place to watch it, you find somebody to watch it with, check it out. Like I said, just enjoy the pageantry of it. Enjoy the wildness of it. Know that it's, not something we see very often. Know that Tyson Fury is probably going to win. But, man, it would be cool if Francis Ngannou can catch him. You know us, man. We're protective of our MMA guys, right? We want to see our MMA guys do good. Nothing would make me happier than for Francis Ngannou to go in there and shock the world, man. Yeah. That would be incredible. But there's a reason it would be shocking the world.
Before we take off, recap from last week. Dylan Dennis did file an appeal with the Athletic Commission to get that loss overturned. You know what? He's got a hell of an argument. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but if they want to play this thing down the middle, it should be a no contest. It really should.
I agree. He's got an argument. I don't know that they'll revisit it. I don't know that they're going to want to deal with it, but he does have an argument, and we touched on it. It was some very, very weird circumstances as to how it was called.
Yeah. So anyways, UFC 294 in the books. Islam's good. Hazmat's good. Nutshot's hurt. Foul should be disqualified. But, hey, Fury and Ngannou this weekend. If you get it, give me maybe FaceTime me and I'll watch it through your FaceTime. But anyways, till next week, for John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. Enjoy the fights.